more depth you have in understanding the Quran, the more you understand the deen itself. So, we've talked about Surat Al-Baqara, and I can revise with you quickly what we've done so far. We talked about Surat Al-Fatiha first, of course. We talked about the 7 themes of Surat Al-Fatiha that you need to keep in mind whenever you're studying the Quran or reading any verse in the Quran. These 7 themes have to stay in your mind all the time. Surat Al-Baqara is by far the longest surah of the Quran, the largest number of verses, and the longest in terms of how many pages and how many words there are in it. It is divided into an introduction, and the introduction serves as an introduction to the surah and the whole Quran itself. And we talked about the points of that introduction, and then there's 2 parts basically. The first part tells us our job description, and the second part, what we will talk about, hopefully we'll talk about inshallah today, gives us the system that we're going to live by. So basically Surah Al-Baqarah is very simple in its theme. It's the longest surah, but it's the simplest in understanding what it's talking about. The purpose is very clear. It's just here to tell you what your job is, why you were created, what purpose you serve, why are you alive, what are you here to do, and then what you're going to use to achieve that. Meaning, what tools are you going to use? What is it that you're going to make you? Yeah, that's still out of focus. See if you can focus that up a bit. Still out of focus, but is it readable to people behind it? Not really, yeah. You can pull it back. I don't need it to be close to me. You just need to see where we are. So I can scroll down. So while they try to focus it, so what we had done last time. The first part tells us you are a Khalifa. And it goes through a few points. It talks about the job description itself, of the Khalifa. Then it gives an example of the first person who was given that job, Adam alayhi salam. Now Adam alayhi salam was destined to be on earth, was destined to carry this mission and carry this burden. And the story is it's not one of the longer stories of Adam alayhi salam. It's very simple. It just gives us that one specific point. And then it gives us examples. The rest of the surah, the rest of the parts are going to give us examples of either those who were Khalifa before us, those who did a really good job, and those who did not. So the first part that we're still in the midst of is talking about Banu Israel. Banu Israel was the last group of people who were given this job description. And Banu Israel, they made mistakes, and they did a few things correctly. But the surah talks about a lot of their mistakes. And when it talks about their mistakes, it's not to criticize them, it's more so that we can learn, so we don't fall into those same mistakes. And that's where we are right now. And after that, there'll be the example of those who succeeded, like Ibrahim and Yaqub, and there'll be some advice for us at the end. But we're going to go through the points. We haven't finished going through the points talking about Banu Israel. So we arrived at point number 1, 2, 3, 4. So we talked about the commands that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to Banu Israel. There's ayahs from 47 to 66, were just repeated mistakes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about. And then reducing status, we talked about ayah number 61, where they asked to be moved from the Holy Land to a different land, just because they wanted to eat different types of food. And it just gave example of those who can be very superficial in the way they think. So the chapter of that, ayah number 67 to ayah number 73. And this is the story of Al-Baqarah. And it's always important to take a moment and talk about the story that the surah is named after. Not every surah is named after a story, but the surahs will be named after words that have some significance within the surah itself, and is always worthy of taking a moment and kind of studying that and thinking about it. So the surah, the longest surah in the Quran, and probably one of the most significant one in terms of understanding what we're here to do as human beings, is called Al-Baqarah. It's called the cow. And you always go, why would that be the name of it? And if you try to come up with some mystic connection between cows and our purpose, it's not going to happen. It's really just a story that the surah has in it, and the story is known as the story of the cow itself. So what is it? With قال موسى لقومه إن الله يأمركم أن تذبحوا بقرة. So ayah number 60, right? 67 to 73. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the story of this story of Musa only exists in Surat Al-Baqarah. It doesn't exist anywhere else, not repeated elsewhere. That's why the surah was called after it. It's a very important and significant story. And I will summarize it quickly for you, then I'll talk about why the surah was called after it. Even though the surah could have been called after many other things, because it's a huge surah with a lot of significant stories in it, and a lot of stories that are unique to it. It could have been called anything, but it's called Al-Baqarah. So Musa alayhi salam, amongst Bani Israel, and this is after Fir'aun, after they went through the sea, and they're in the years of kind of trying to get to the Holy Land, but they don't want to actually go in, and they're fighting, and it's a big mess. So, but Musa has a large group of people, large tribe that he is running, and he is taking care of. And there's a murder that happens. Someone is killed, and they can't figure out who killed this person. And they ask Musa alayhi salam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them a command. He tells them, "Idbahu baqara." So they said, "قَالُوا وَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا." Are you mocking us? We ask you who killed this man, you tell us to slaughter a cattle. قال أعوذ بالله أن أكون من الجاهلين. Of course not. أعوذ بالله. That would never take a matter of this seriousness in vain or in mockery. This is actually what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. So they go on and start asking all these questions. As you know the story, they start asking, well, what is it like? Well, what color is it? Well, what can it do? And he goes into detail, alayhi salam. He starts answering them in a lot of detail. He starts telling them, okay, لا فارغ ولا بكر عوان بين. It's not very old, it's not very young, it's somewhere in the middle. It's not like a calf that's only a year of age or 2 years of age. It's not a cow at 15 years of age. It's something in the middle. صفراء has to be yellowish color. فاقع اللون, very bright. تسر الناظرين, it needs to be beautiful, needs to look beautiful, it has to be healthy. لا ذلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها. It's not a cow that's been used for work for many years. It's not cows that can pull the plows or anything like that. So he gives them all these very specific details of what the cow is like, and they finally do it. فذبحوها, as you can see in ayah. I can't see the ayat anymore. فذبحوها وما كادوا يفعلون. It's too far away. فذبحوها وما كادوا يفعلون. So they did it. They slaughtered it, but they almost didn't. They almost actually didn't do it. And then I talked about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them, فَقُلْنَا اضْرِبُوهُ بِبَعْضِهَا, and take one of their bones, tap the deceased. He comes back, he says who kills them, and he goes back again. And that's simplifying the story. But why is the surah named by the story? Now this is where the surah is telling us that you're a Khalifa, you're here for a mission and a purpose. And you're going to carry that mission by living in a certain way. You're going to carry yourself in a certain manner. Islam is the system that you're going to use. The second part is going to go in detail of how that is. So what is the significance of the story? I'll ask you a question and inshallah it'll occur to you. Had Banu Israel slaughtered, when they were told to do this, had they slaughtered a black cow, would it have worked?
No.
Would it have worked?
No.
Some people saying no, some people saying yes. Had they slaughtered a green cow, would it have worked? Had they slaughtered a brown cow? Had they slaughtered a sheep?
If God said so, yes.
Would it have worked? They slaughtered a sheep? No one. They think it's a trick question. No, it's not a trick question. I'm actually asking the question. It's a matter of just kind of breaking things down. He said, "In Allah ya'murukum an tadhbahu baqara." Slaughter a cow, right? So if they slaughtered a sheep, would it work? No. If they slaughtered a donkey, it wouldn't work. If they slaughtered any other animal, it wouldn't work. But if they slaughtered a black, brown, green, purple, yellow, pink cow, it would have worked. As long as it's a cow. As long as it meets the criteria of what he gave them, subhanahu wa ta'ala, it would have worked. Now what they did, the mistake that they made, is they insisted on being given very detailed instructions. They took something that was very wide in nature, and they were focused on narrowing it down to something that was very difficult. It took them, in the narrations that we have, it took them months to find this cow that meets all the descriptions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Musa gave them. And they would find a cow that has all 6 things, but it doesn't have the 7th. They would find a cow that it's yellow, this is its age, but it's been plowing for years. Okay, it doesn't work. Find another one, it's young, it's not too young, it's not too old, but it's not yellow. Okay, it doesn't work. But had they not gone into these details early on, when he said, "Idbahu baqara," and they just took a cow and slaughtered the cow, at the end of it, that would be ordered. So what is that? Learning about Islam is very similar to this. This is one of the biggest mistakes Banu Israel made, and these are one of the biggest mistakes that we tried to make during the Prophet ﷺ's life, and we are making today. And this is what will ruin your mission. One of the major things, if not the biggest thing, that will ruin your purpose as a Muslim, as someone who will be a Khalifa, to continue carry on the legacy of the Prophets before you and living the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded, is living with this narrow-minded mentality. Is looking at things like that. Is seeing Islam as a very narrow line that we all have to stand behind each other and walk down, or else everyone else is wrong. When Islam is more like a river. it's a bit wider, so we can all be swimming in different parts of it, but as long as we're swimming inside the river, within the banks of the river in the same direction, then we're fine. And there's no problem. I wrote a paper on this when I was in university. Not just on the story itself, but on the concept of understanding Islam itself. That there's more than one way to be right. In most issues of the deen, there's more than one right opinion. There really is. And the less you know that, so those who don't know that, they don't have a lot of knowledge. The more you know that there are many, many opinions that are valid, and that the issues that are very specific are very few. And those are the ones we have to hold on to. And those are our maxims and our axiomatic matters, and those are our principles that we never, ever, ever compromise in our lives. But there are only few things. It's not a huge list. It's not an endless list of things that cannot be discussed and that don't have more than one way of looking at it. No, it's actually very few things that we carry in our deen. And establishing these topics, understanding them and knowing them, is what makes us good Muslims. And not knowing these things will make you'll compromise where you shouldn't compromise. On the other side of things, if you're someone who thinks everything in Islam is either yes or no, right or wrong, then living with you is very difficult. You know people like that? Yes, you do. You know many people like that. You maybe have people like that in your own family. How much do people enjoy being around them? No one does. No one likes being around them at all. And it's not something weird. It's hard to live by someone who needs every detail answered, who thinks that everything has to be known down to its most specific detail. Yes, given there's a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes the most or loves the most, if you were to ask, what is the best cow for us to slaughter? This would be the best one to slaughter, but any other cow would have sufficed. Are you understanding here where the point of the story of the surah is? This is the one He would love the most, subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the description of the type of cow that He would love you to slaughter the most, and then give the meat to the poor and use it. That's what He would love the most. But if you slaughtered anything that meets the description of a cow, and it's not some other animal, then you're fine. You're fine. And in the deen, there are a lot of questions where what do we do here? And I'll tell people, well, there's a bunch of opinions. There's this and there's that. No. What's right? Yes, there's no. You have to. You don't know. No, that's not how it is. That's really not how it is. I can lie to you and tell you what I want. It's easy. Like that's the easiest way to be. I can just tell you what I like, and so that's the right thing. Everything else is wrong, and then you have to stick to what I want, and that's self-serving to me. But the truth of the matter is the story of Al-Baqara. فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. Why is it that Islam is like that? Because when you take things, you detail them like that, and you make it very narrow and difficult, people do it, but they barely do. And it comes to a point where they'll stop doing it. When it becomes so strict and so difficult, people will let go, and they'll stop following. There's more than one way, right, to skin a cat. Yes, go ahead.
Where do you draw the line between actually people saying that I follow my own version of Islam?
Yeah.
That's how I understand it.
Sure.
And what's right?
Yeah. So coming to that is the very critical and scary question. Well, does that open the door for everyone just to make things up and to start saying, well, that's how I see it, and this is an open issue? Knowledge and evidence is what is used. Islam is a very evidence-based religion. You want to say something is right or wrong, you want to argue this is okay or not okay, you have to have evidence. Your heart and your feelings does not qualify as evidence. How you feel about something, right, doesn't work. Your personal intuition doesn't matter. You may be mashallah, very, very smart person, and you always have your heart's in the right place all the time. But when it comes to Islamic issues or the Islamic matters and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands and orders, what you feel doesn't really matter. What I feel doesn't matter. All that matters is what can I prove? And can I put up an argument that is valid enough to say that there's more than one opinion that is proper within this situation? So that's where it comes down to. So he's like, your version of Islam. I'm happy to say, oh, that sounds nice. Well, so tell me, what is your version? So he starts telling me, I think this is halal, this is haram. Okay, well, give me your evidence. And that's where people fail every time. 10 times out of 10 when I talk to people about Islam and they're living their own version of things, and I sit down with them and I just ask the question, okay, please tell me, when you look at drinking as halal, well, please explain to me, how did you arrive at that conclusion? And he starts making things up, and he's never read the Quran before. You find out this person has never read the Quran, doesn't even know what the words, doesn't understand the linguistics of this surah, doesn't know when it was revealed, knows nothing. So your knowledge base is zero, yet you have the audacity to say, I have my own version of Allah's commands. That's not how things are done. It's not how things are done. So yes, you can be one day someone who says, I've studied this issue Islamically, and I have an opinion, and this is my evidence, and that's fine. And no one will fault you for doing that. However, the question is, do you have the tools to make that statement? If I don't know much about anything really. I don't know much about law, for example. I can't come and start arguing law-related issues. And I can't come up with a theory. And I can't stand up in front of a couple of judges and lawyers and tell them that this is what I think is right. They won't even give me the time of the day. And they wouldn't be faulted for it. Because I don't have any background in this. I am not a researcher within this field. I don't carry a degree. I understand the history. I don't know anything. It's improper of me, and it's not for me to come and start making things up. If I really feel strongly about an issue, then I need to spend a certain amount of time studying. I have to earn my right to speak within a field. Same thing in medicine. And in doctor, we deal with this daily. We study for what, maybe 20 years of our lives, maybe something like that. And then you're standing in front of a patient explaining something, and they're trying to convince you of something different because they Googled it. Because a friend of a friend took a pill that had a certain color and it worked for them, and now it's a 35-minute conversation. And of course, within the service that we offer people, that's fine because that's our job to educate and all. But would that argument stand within the medical field? Could they come to a university and argue that this is better treatment without a medical degree? No one would accept that. So if you want to talk about the deen, I encourage you to. But I encourage you have to have the right tools with you. You need to know the language. You need to know the linguistics. You have to have knowledge of prophecies before the Prophet ﷺ, of his life, والسلام, of how the Quran works and what fiqh looks like and what hadith is. You have to know what he said during his life and did. If that is not known to you, then coming up with a completely new idea is not something that I don't think is proper. I don't think it's right. My problem more is with Muslims who refuse to acknowledge, so that's to answer your question, but that's not the point that I was trying to make here. And I don't think that's the point that Surah is trying to make. The point that Surah is trying to make is, when there is an open way of looking at things, when it's widened by Allah, I mean He didn't specify in detail certain things, then don't narrow it upon yourself. And don't claim it to be narrow. And don't make it difficult for people when He didn't make it difficult for people Himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tawheed, for example, that's a one-way road. There are no two opinions on this. La ilaha illallah, period. There's nothing else. If you believe there's anyone else in this universe who has any power beyond Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's it. You walked out of Islam through its largest door. If you don't believe the Prophet ﷺ is a prophet, you're done. If you don't believe he's the final prophet, you're done. If you think there's a word in this book that is not proper, that is not the word of Allah, you're out. There's certain things that remove you immediately, meaning you're no longer a part of the deen anymore. Which is fine. That's your choice, that's your choice, if that's what you want to believe. But these are certain things in the deen that are clear cut. There is no... we're not narrowing things that are wide. These are narrow by nature. They are self-evident issues that are very clear. And then there are other stuff. Then just today, I think one was telling me that during Eid, someone objected to the way that the takbirat were done, and they were told that that's the wrong way to do it because he lived in a different country where they did it differently. That's a very simple example. No, it doesn't matter. This is something that's very simple. There are 100 ways to do this. And all ways are fine. And again, I'm giving examples that aren't controversial because I don't want to start controversy in this halaqah. It's not the point of it. It's only to explain to you that this is how things are looked at. So if you look at an issue and you're wondering, well, I've heard that this may not be as haram as they say or halal, you need to research it objectively. You need to ask. You have to go into detail. You have to have evidence to use. And if your evidence doesn't stand, can't hold its merit in the conversation, in the debate, then you have to accept that okay, this is not a proper, this is not a proper opinion. And there are a lot of issues like that. There are many examples I can give. Hijab is one of them. Hijab is a strong one, especially with the sisters. It's a very strong issue. It's a very difficult one to deal with because I get this almost every day from both sisters and brothers who come and say, well, how is this Islamic? And the moment I start talking evidence, it's over. Meaning that they're not interested in having the conversation anymore. Because when I talk evidence, I'm going to start quoting the Quran for them. Because what the Quran says, and they don't understand Arabic, or they never looked at it, or they are not willing to look at the linguistics behind it. And it's more of a social argument. Well, things have changed, and liberties and equal. That's all acceptable, but that's not how Islamic evidence is dealt with. That's not how the deen is used. You look at the evidence. If the evidence is unequivocal, you go for it. And if it's equivocal, if there's more than one way of looking at it, then the only thing that can harm you is either your personal bias, meaning you're like Bani Israel, you don't accept that there's more than one way, or the person who is speaking to you is not honest. Are you understanding the problem? These are the two things that can happen. Either you have a strong personal bias, you want it to be a certain way. You have, there's some reason where you want it to be a certain way, you don't want it to be another way. Or the person who's speaking to you does. So I take away a part, and that part isn't there. And then I explain to you everything else, and I use that evidence, and I fail to tell you the other part of the evidence. Idbahu baqara, just slaughter a cow. Any cow would have worked. There's a million cows, but they asked for details, they were given details. There is something He loves subhanahu wa ta'ala more than most. You can seek that in your life. You can seek that for yourself. But you can't force others to do it. That's the point. تأخذ لنفسك بالأحوط ولغيرك بالأيسر. This is how the faqih is. This is how someone who understands Islam is supposed to deal with Islam, with others. You take for yourself, if you want, the more cautious opinion, and then you offer people the easiest of opinions that all fall under the umbrella of proper Islam, obviously. It's okay for you to say, Wallahi, I believe this is something that is mubah, it's okay, but I personally don't do it. I personally do it. If you ask me, can we eat meat that is not stamped with halal? I'll tell you the evidence. I'll tell you the Jumhur have no problem with the dhabiha of Ahl al-Kitab. It's only the Hanafiya that think you have to eat from a Muslim's slaughter. I personally don't eat it. But I have no problem if you do. Are you understanding how this is just a simple example that we live with every day? If it's a dhabiha of Ahl al-Kitab, if it's someone who is a Christian or a Jew and they didn't slaughter it for a sanam, the Jumhur of Ahl al-Ilm, the majority of the scholars have no problem with it. And the Hanafiya do. Abu Hanifa in his school, they said no, it has to be a Muslim who slaughters it. There's two opinions. I go by I take the more cautious approach. That doesn't mean I'm going to tell you, no, the Jumhur is wrong here. Unless I can prove through sound evidence that they are. Unless I can show you through evidence that the majority of scholars were wrong by this, and that happens sometimes. It's not like it never happens. But I have to be able to do that. If I can't do that, if I look at the evidence and it's equivocal, meaning there's a good argument for both parties here, you have to offer both opinions. And then you can take for yourself whatever you want to take for yourself. You can take the more difficult, more strict for yourself, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's wrong to tell people that this is the only way, and that what you're doing is wrong and haram. Unless you have a strong evidence. And if you do, that's how you have to present it. Again, that's how it has to be presented. I have to stand up and say, look, this is an issue of difference of opinion. But I don't believe that the difference of opinion is valid here. And this is why. I have to make it very clear to you that there is difference of opinion, but I don't think it's a valid difference of opinion. I think that there's only one way to do this, and here's the evidence behind it. And that's my job, to tell you all of that. This is taken from the concept of baqarah. There is more than one way to do this. Green cow, black cow, purple cow, pink cow, white cow, all worked. What He would like the most, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the cow that was explained here. Why? I don't know. And it doesn't really matter. That's what He likes the most, subhanahu wa ta'ala. You may not be able to come to that conclusion yourself, but anything would have worked. Why narrow it? Why? So when they did narrow it, He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَانُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. So they slaughtered, but they almost didn't. When you narrow it down too much, you almost don't do it anymore, because it comes too hard. So when you enter Islam, a lot of people they enter the deen, they've been away from the deen for a long time, so they want to enter Islam, and they come and ask for advice. The only piece of advice I give them is slow down and take it easy. Because the last 10 years, no prayer, nothing. And suddenly they want to do 5 with the sunnah and the tasbihat and the dua and qiyam al-layl, and you're going to be burnt out within a week. You'll be burnt out and you'll be done. You'll be back to what you were doing before. You'll lose it all. Take it slowly. Start with the basics. Just do the basics. If you can hold on to the 5 farad. You don't have to fast every Ithnain or Khamis. Just fast Ramadan when it comes. Start slowly. Enter the deen by taking the priorities, taking the really important stuff. You see, when we teach our kids that knocking down a cup and breaking it and screaming in your mother's face gets the same reaction, we are messing with their heads. We're telling them that these two things are equal. Priority-wise, they're the same thing. Because he got slapped on the head for that one and slapped on the head for that one. For him, it's like, oh, it's the same thing. So whether I scream at my mom or I break a cup, it's the same thing. They're not the same thing. We know they're not the same thing, and we don't accept it to be the same thing. Within Islam, there's a similar simile here that I'm talking about. Not everything has the same level of importance. If I have a young man who's coming to the masjid, and he's, alhamdulillah, he's not drinking, he's not involved in extramarital relationships, he's praying his prayers, but he has a weird haircut, I don't care. I do not care at all. Like I don't even dress the haircut, even though when the father and mother come in, that's all they care about. And I give this example many times because it's the simplest example, and I don't want to give examples that are more difficult. And I can give you examples that will make your, send a shiver up your spine of what I've heard, and what people come and talk to me about, and what they don't see happening right in front of them. What they're missing in front of them, and what they're interested about, because they can't see, they don't know what the priorities are. As long as you can get the basics, that's good. Everything that is added after that is khair. It's khair, we can hope for more. Get them to memorize the Quran, get them to love this is great stuff, but we need to make sure that we prioritize properly. And we explain to them the priorities. These are ethics, being honest, being just, being fair, never lying. These are issues that are very Islamic. They're not outside of the Islamic scope. These are within the midst of the deen, the essence of the deen. And then if they want to play soccer and they want to go out and they enjoy music and weigh things out, or else if everything is no, it's just at some point they'll just say, whatever. I'm tired. It's too many restrictions. Everything seems to be haram. That's not how it is. Any cow. Why does it have to be yellow, and it has to be a certain age, and it has to be it can't be worked, and it can't be this, why does it have to be so difficult? He likes that the most, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some people will live like that, but not everyone will. You can't force everyone to do that either. Okay. I hope that was clear. That's from 67-73. Talks about the story that gives a and the surah was named after Surat Al-Baqara. It's like as he's telling you your purpose and what you're going to use, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind that the deen is not narrow, it's actually quite wide. I'm going to tell you what to do. This is haram, this is halal. You're going to live like this, but understand that beyond that and outside that, even within it, there's room. There's a lot of room in what can be done. You just need to know and understand, have knowledge, and have evidence. Okay. So the point after that from ayah 74, specifically 74, that just happened after that story. ثم قست قلوبكم من بعد ذلك فهي كالصلب.
So early when you told to the account,
yeah,
you could have started anything.
Anything.
After they questioned,
they can't do it anymore. Yeah. So once they questioned it, they had to do that count, obviously, because you already made the mistake. You already narrowed it down. And that's why, and we'll talk about that more, that specific point, in Surat Al-Ma'idah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tas'alu an ashya'a in tubda lakum tasu'kum. There's an ayah that will talk about that specific point, and we'll come back to Surat Al-Baqara when we do. But here, the story is more, it's a wide thing. He gives generalized commands, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he does that on purpose, to keep it open, to keep it easy, so he doesn't narrow it too much. So there's some level of ease in what you're going to do. The ayah after that talks about hardened hearts. This is another mistake that Banu Israel made. And wallahu they made this mistake based on the fact that they narrowed things down upon themselves. Meaning they didn't accept that a lot of the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are wide in nature. ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً. Your hearts hardened and they became like rock, or even more solid than rock. The problem of a hard heart, or a solid heart, or a heart that doesn't have mercy and compassion in it. وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَّقَّقُ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَهْبِطُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. And yet from rocks you will find rocks that water will gush out of them, and water will seep out of them, and some of them will fall and prostrate in the fearfulness of Allah. Our hearts sometimes won't. He's talking to Bani Israel, that you allowed your hearts to harden. This is another mistake that they made. It could be related to the mistake they made in the Baqarah. It could be a general one. I don't know. But think about it. And think about, whenever we think about their mistakes, we're just drawing the parallel to ourselves, really. We're not here to enjoy talking about how they made it. It's here for us. What about our hearts? How hardened are our own hearts? And if our hearts are hardened, and we lack compassion, we lack mercy, and we lack khushu', and we don't have closeness anymore, and we're not moved by anything, and then what's the difference between your heart and It's like what he's drawing the similarity to a rock. A rock is a non-living thing. Your heart is the essence of your life. You take out your heart, you die. Every other organ you can still survive for a certain period of time if we take it out. But not the heart. The heart's out, you're done. Right? So life, and he's telling you your heart sometimes is more solid, it's more hard than something that has no life in it, like a rock. He's saying once your heart lacks that softness, that closeness, that compassion, that mercy, it's like you're not really alive anymore. It's like life doesn't mean anything to you. You're not really living. If you don't have the ability to respond emotionally to what happens around you. If you harden your heart, if you look at things, if you hear people suffering, if you deal with people around you who are going through difficulties, and you do not feel the necessity or you don't have the urge to help and to be there for them because your heart is hardened, then nothing in the deen will work for you. Nothing I say will make a difference for you. You can come to 1,000,000 halaqah, it's not going to do anything at all. It's a waste of your time. You have to go back to that point. You have to go back to find, why is my heart hard? What happened? Sometimes you need therapy for it. Wallah, sometimes you have to go speak to someone and they have to figure out what happened to you in your life. Because we're very good at forgetting, consciously forgetting things that happened. And then when we sit in front of someone, they ask us the story of our life, and we tell it, we listen to it from our own mouths, and we're like, wow, I lived a messed up life. I didn't realize it though. I've really been through horrible stuff, but I never actually thought about it or dealt with it on a personal level. Or your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been dead for a long time, and you're trying to keep up that image. Trying to keep up the image of a Muslim, but deep down inside, you haven't spoken to him in years. You haven't connected with him in decades. ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُمْ. And then your heart's hardened. An ayah that is very, very, I give it its own rule because it's such an important ayah. The Prophet would often recite this ayah. The mistake after that, again, we're just talking about, we're going through the part of Banu Israel's mistakes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about the first, told us our job, told us who the first Khalifa was Adam, then He gave us the example of Banu Israel who didn't do the job properly, and we're going through all the mistakes that they made. I believe that if we learn all these mistakes and we fix them, then we're going to be fine. Because He told us this is what they did. See, they did this. They were people who were not, they made repeat their mistakes. They didn't care. They were superficial in their status. They narrowed down their religion. They hardened their hearts. Point after that, they manipulated text. So from ayah number 75 to 82. أَفَتَطْمَعُونَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا لَكُمْ وَقَدْ كَانَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ يُحَرِّفُونَهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا عَقَلُوهُ وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. You're hoping that Banu Israel will ever listen to you as a Muslim. When they were given the text of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether Jews or Christians, given the text of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they heard it, and then they يُحَرِّفُونَهُ, they manipulated it, they changed it, and they knew they were changing it. So if you go on, فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ, the ayah talk about, comment on that specific point. فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ ثُمَّ يَقُولُونَ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ لِيَشْتَرُوا بِهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا فَوَيْلٌ لَهُمْ مِمَّا كَتَبَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَوَيْلٌ لَهُمْ مِمَّا يَكْسِبُونَ. Warn them of a horrible punishment. Those who write the book with their own hands, who hear Allah's word and say, no, no, no. And then they add their own thing to it. And then they say, this is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Warn them of punishment for what they have written and what they have said and what they have done. And they go on beyond that. And they go on, they said, وَقَالُوا لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارِ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودًا. And they say, if you make mistakes, you'll only be punished for a few days. This is a scary ayah. Because they are the followers of the book. Meaning there are people, if they follow the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they go to Jannah. And yet what they're saying is, لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارِ. If we make mistakes, then we'll only be harmed by the fire for a few days. But you're like, well, isn't that right? Like in your mind, like, that's right. Like if I make a few mistakes and I don't do things right, I'll only go into the hellfire for a few days, right? For a period of time. أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودًا means a set period of time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks, that's what you're saying? قُلْ أَتَّخَذْتُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَهْدًا. Did Allah give you His word on that? أَمْ تَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Or are you just making things up? بَلَى. What they said was wrong. مَنْ كَسَبَ سَيِّئَةً وَأَحَاطَتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ. Those who make mistakes and are fixated upon those mistakes and build mistakes upon those mistakes. I mean, they do not stand back, they don't stand down, they don't return, they don't repent from them, they don't admit, I was wrong, I shouldn't have done that. And they continue one mistake after another, building upon their early mistakes. فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. And it's not going to be a few days, unfortunately. They manipulated the text. They started making things up. Start changing things around. You asked me the question a second ago. My version of the deen. An example of it. Make things up. Change what the word is saying. We do it for different reasons. We do it so we don't have to follow, or we do it because we have an agenda and want others to follow our agenda. And we do it for political gain. Those who are extremists who are killing people, they do the same thing. They come and say, yeah, parts of this Quran, this is the ayah you should read. The rest of it you shouldn't read. The rest of it doesn't count. Isn't that manipulating text? Isn't that declaring that this part of the text doesn't count? This part of the text doesn't have the same weight as the other part of it does. Or those who refuse to accept that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says and say, no, that was for back then. Now is the 21st century. This doesn't apply anymore. That's manipulating text. He gave you a word and you're cherry picking. You're copy pasting. I want this part, I don't want that part. Well, everyone can do that. And if everyone does that, we end up in the mess that we're in today. But I did the same thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about them. Look at ayah number 76. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا وَإِذَا خَلَى بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ قَالُوا أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ لِيُحَاجُّوكُمْ بِهِ عِنْدَ رَبِّكُمْ. When they talk to the Muslims, they say, we believe like you, but they don't want to go into detail. Because the Muslim is like, no, let's talk about evidence, let's talk about details. And when they sit with each other and don't talk to them about details, if they talk to you about details, they'll pin you down with evidence, and then you have to answer for this in front of Allah, so don't do that anymore. أَوَلَا يَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا يُسِرُّونَ وَمَا يُعْلِنُونَ. Do not know that Allah subhanahu knows what they say, even in secrets, and they think like that. We've done the same. It's not too hard. I'm not going to give examples today. You can think of it yourself. We've done the same thing. We manipulate our own text many, many times. And until we go back to the Quran itself, until we accept the Quran, everything in it, the parts of it that we really enjoy, the parts of it that we don't necessarily enjoy. Enjoying it is not a criteria for accepting it. You don't have to like it. There may be parts of it, there are going to be parts of it. He's going to command you, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you may not like the command. You may feel that's hard or difficult, or you may not be able to see the wisdom in it at the moment that you were commanded to do it. Doesn't mean that you don't do it. Doesn't mean that you don't follow His command, subhanahu wa ta'ala. People manipulate text for these different reasons. The point after that, causing bloodshed. Another mistake that Banu Israel made is they caused bloodshed amongst each other. وَإِذَا أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ, from ayah number 83. لَا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. When we gave Bani Israel their covenant, and their covenant was very simple. Worship Allah, be kind to your parents, be kind to the orphans and your neighbors and those who are related to you, and say nice things to people. قُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. Say the best of words. Always say the kindest of words. Always say that will allow people to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not push them farther away. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. The basic stuff. Connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, establish your prayers and offer zakah for those who are in need. ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. When you're given these very simple commands, you didn't embrace it the way you were supposed to. So he took upon them a simpler covenant. وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَكُمْ لَا تَسْفِكُونَ دِمَاءَكُمْ. Then we took the covenant, just don't cause bloodshed. If all that was not something you're going to follow fully, if you're not going to follow that in completion, the worshipping of Allah and the way you're going to deal with your parents and those who are weak, and you're going to say the best and you're going to do your prayer and give your zakah, it's a beautiful way to live. But if you're not going to do that, then at least this, لا تسفكون دماءكم. Don't cause bloodshed. ولا تخرجون أنفسكم من دياركم. And don't cause people to leave their homes. Don't oppress others and transgress against them and throw them out of their homes and their houses. ثم أقررتم وأنتم تشهدون. The first time, ثم توليتم. You look at the ayah before. ثم توليتم إلا قليلا منكم. Most of you couldn't follow all of this. Most of you didn't listen. But the second part, second ayah, ثم أقررتم, said yes, we can do that. وأنتم تشهدون. And then they didn't do it. ثم أنتم هؤلاء تقتلون أنفسكم وتخرجون فريقا منكم من ديارهم. And then you went ahead and you did it anyway. And you slaughtered people and you murdered them in front of their homes. And you caused bloodshed amongst yourselves. Within these ayah that talk about bloodshed is a very precious verse where he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, right in ayah number 85, in the middle of it, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. You're going to believe in parts of the book and disbelieve in other parts. You take whatever you like and you leave whatever you don't like. No. فَمَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ إِلَّا خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Those who do that will be humiliated in this life. وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ. On the day of judgment they will be punished. وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. Causing bloodshed. When you look at it, who caused more bloodshed for their own people? Was it Banu Israel or did we do it? Historically, there are very few civilizations that compete with us in the amount of bloodshed that we've caused for ourselves before causing it to others. Banu Israel were told, don't do it to others, don't do it to yourselves. And then they couldn't compete with us. And the amount of bloodshed that we've allowed to happen to ourselves and that we've brought upon ourselves and others. And as if the ayah is saying, look, if you can't do all of it, can you just do this? Just make sure that you don't oppress others. Make sure there's no bloodshed. Make sure there's no transgression. At least that. At least hold on to that. But we come and we pray jama'ah, and then we go and we oppress other people, and we participate in bloodshed. And what's the point? What's the point? The point after that, refusing Allah's command from 89 to 101. This is a long stretch. Starts when he says subhanahu wa ta'ala وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ كِتَابٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ مُصَدِّقٌ لِمَا مَعَهُمْ وَكَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ يَسْتَفْتِحُونَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُم مَّا عَرَفُوا كَفَرُوا بِهِ فَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. Banu Israel, in their book, they knew that the Prophet at the end of the time was going to come. And they had that in their book, and they always يَسْتَفْتِحُونَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. They always tell the disbelievers or the pagans of Quraysh that the day will come when the final Prophet will arrive. So when he finally came, alayhi salatu wasalam, they disbelieved in him. What they knew was going to happen, happened. They had the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that once he comes, join. And they refused. And then the ayahs continue, talking about how many times they were told, they were commanded to believe in something or do something, and they refused the command. See, other mistakes are mistakes of nafs, are mistakes of ego, and mistakes of self-interest. But what he's talking about from 89 to 101 are just clear-cut refusal. They just don't, they're not going to do it. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, if you look at ayah number 91, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ قَالُوا نُؤْمِنُ بِمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَيْنَا وَيَكْفُرُونَ بِمَا وَرَاءَهُ وَهُوَ الْحَقُّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَهُمْ. When they're told, believe in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, they only believe in the part of it that was given to them. And they refuse everything before them and everything that was going to come after them, even though they know that that's a part of it as well. وَيَكْفُرُونَ بِمَا وَرَاءَهُ وَهُوَ الْحَقُّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَهُمْ. Even though what wasn't given to them is the truth, and they have evidence of it being the truth. مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَهُمْ. What that means, that's a linguistic that's a linguistic phrase in the Quran. You'll see it many, many times. مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَهُمْ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَكُمْ, something like that. What does it mean? It means that you have evidence of this being truthful. مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَكُمْ, it is similar to what you have. It is a continuation of what you have. You have evidence that what you're seeing right now is truthful as well. That's why whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Isa, He always says مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ التَّوْرَةِ. I mean, there's evidence of him in the Torah that he was going to come, but they refused. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was evidence of him coming, but they refused. And what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught and did, there's evidence of it in their books that was going to happen, but they refused. When you refuse Allah's command subhanahu wa ta'ala just because you refuse. You go down, ayah number 93, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَكُمْ, right over here, وَرَفَعْنَا فَوْقَكُمُ الطُّورَ خُذُوا مَا آتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ وَاسْمَعُوا. It goes back to that moment where the mountain was about to crumble upon them. And they were told at that moment, take what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you fully, in completion, وَاسْمَعُوا, and follow His commands. What did they say? قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا. We've heard and we will not follow. You don't like it. Too hard, it's too much. سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا وَأُشْرِبُوا فِي قُلُوبِهِمُ الْعِجْلَ بِكُفْرِهِمْ. Because I said that, the ijl, worshipping the calf, continued to be a part of the way they thought. وَالْبِئْسَ مَا يَأْمُرُكُمْ بِهِ إِيمَانُكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. This is a horrible iman that you have that is causing you and commanding you and allowing you to refuse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. That's why at the end of the surah, we're going to be something different, right? At the end of Surat Al-Baqara, it's going to go back to that ayah in some way. And we're going to be told what we're supposed to say. We're going to be given our version of it. They said سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا. Just blunt refusal. You'll see the ayat are very clear. Just giving examples of blunt refusal. We don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. And that goes up to ayah number 101. Give another example of it. At the end of the page, وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ مُصَدِّقٌ لِمَا مَعَهُ. And when the Prophet ﷺ came, so the first ayah talked about the book. When the Quran came, they had evidence of the Quran, they refused. When the Prophet ﷺ came, they had evidence of him as well. نَبَذَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِهِمْ. They took their own book, I mean the Torah, Kitab Allah, and they put it behind their backs, meaning they stopped reading it. I mean they stopped listening to it. Even though in their book it says he's going to come, this is what he's going to look like, this is what he's going to say, this is how he's going to be. And they look at the Prophet ﷺ, it's a perfect fit. So they stopped reading it. Just blunt refusal. They just don't want to. They just don't want to. Within this paragraph of refusal of command, there's a small group of ayat. If you look at this point after, focused on dunya. From 94 to 96, there's just a small sub-paragraph within it. Where he says subhanahu wa ta'ala to them, قُلْ إِن كَانَتْ لَكُمُ الدَّارُ الْآخِرَةُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ خَالِصَةً مِّن دُونِ النَّاسِ فَتَمَنَّوُا الْمَوْتَ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. As you're refusing commands bluntly and directly, well, if you believe that the akhirah is for you, if you're so sure about it, and that you're going to go to Jannah, no one else is going to go, then please go ahead and ask for death. Hope for death, and move towards death, because you're going to go to Jannah anyway, so why not? The ayah says, وَلَن يَتَمَنَّوهُ أَبَدًا. It will be repeated again in Surah Al-Jumu'ah later, for a different reason. وَلَن يَتَمَنَّوهُ أَبَدًا بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ. They would never do that, because they know what they've done. They know their mistakes that they made. Actually, وَلَتَجِدَنَّهُم, the ayah after, وَلَتَجِدَنَّهُم أَحْرَصَ النَّاسِ عَلَى حَيَاةٍ. They just want to live. Again, this is not to criticize Banu Israel. Always remember that we're not reading these to criticize Banu Israel. That's not the point. We're reading them because this is what we're going to do. These are the mistakes we're going to be facing. These are the obstacles we're going to have. And everything I'm saying we've already done. And it's already happened many, many times. وَلَتَجِدَنَّهُمْ أَحْرَصَ النَّاسِ عَلَى حَيَاةٍ وَمِنَ الَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا يَوَدُّ أَحَدُهُمْ لَوْ يُعَمَّرُ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ وَمَا هُوَ بِمُزَحْزِحِهِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ أَن يُعَمَّرُ. You'll find them to clinch to life. Any life. Doesn't have to be a life of integrity. Doesn't have to be a life of righteousness. Just life. Just one more day. Those are the disbelievers. That's how you'll find them. They're not willing to give up life for any greater cause. They're not willing to stand their ground for anything. They don't stand for anything. Because the moment you're pushed, if you stand for something, there'll come a moment where you have to choose between your principle and money, your principle and popularity, your principle and maybe where you live. Your principle is sometimes your life. Sometimes that's how it works. Sometimes. So if you're a person of principle, you'll always choose your principle and you'll accept all the difficulty that comes with that. And what the ayah is saying is they love dunya so much. They refuse the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason is they love dunya so much. And they just want to live. أَحْرَصَ النَّاسِ عَلَى حَيَاةٍ. Just to live more. They would like to live 1,000 years. However, 1,000 years will not take them away from the punishment that is awaiting them. Live as long as you like. You will die eventually, and then you'll come back and you'll be held accountable. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long you live. The Quran slowly, as we go through the surah, you'll see the Quran slowly commenting about it. It doesn't matter how long you live. It matters what you do within the time that you're given to live. It's about the quality of the time. And this will be explained in the Quran, and then it'll come to Surat Al-Qadr that will break it down for you. That one night can be worth 1,000 months. It's the quality of what you're doing. It's not how long you live. It doesn't matter. Make sure you stand for righteousness so that your life is worthy. And if it ends earlier than you were hoping, expecting, then it ends earlier. There's a million ways to die. At least go out with some integrity. The point after that. Becoming superstitious, losing knowledge, basically. This is a really important part of this surah. It's from 102 to 103, just two verses. These are very known verses. You've read them many times. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. I'm not going to go into detail of explaining the verses. What you lose in the theme-based approach is the detailed explanation of each ayah. Going down to the linguistics, talking about every single piece of wisdom that you can take from the ayah, which are many. You lose that when we're doing a theme-based approach. And what you gain is a bigger picture, is seeing how the verses are moving from one point to the other, bringing for you a story. And then if you want to know details about each ayah, you can go and you can look that up and search it. You can ask questions as well, I'm happy to answer. But this is a long study to understand exactly what happened at the time of Sulaiman and his relationship with jinn, and how that became an issue of sihr, how people picked up superstition, and they picked up what was known as black magic at the time, and this became something that people would use. If you go through the ayah, وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. Everyone who was introduced to this, to black magic and sihr and all this other stuff, they're told this is all a fitna, it's not true. So don't lose your faith because of it. But they do anyway. وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. No one is harmed outside of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Working in masajid for most of my life, I can easily say that this is the biggest issue that we have globally. I can identify issues that we have in the Middle East that we don't have here in Canada, and issues that we have in Canada that we don't have in the Middle East. Like huge problems that societies face on a daily basis that are different. And then there's some global issues that happen everywhere. Number one, people come and say, Hasad, Ayn, Jinn, Sihr. 4 things. Every musibah is one of 4 things. Every time someone sneezes the wrong way, every time your car is scraped, every time you come down with an illness, or you don't win the lottery that week, whatever it is that you don't get, it's because either jinn is in the house, or someone hit you with ayn, or someone's envying you with hasad, or someone wrote magic for you. And this is so difficult to deal with, because I get asked questions that I don't even know how to begin to answer, because they're built on 3 mistakes. So he comes and tells me, this is the question. So how do I get the jinn out of my son? Which surah is better? So he's already established that there's jinn in his son. He's established that there's some way to get it out, and he's established that there's some surah better than other surahs. 3 mistakes, and I have to go back. Okay, let's rewind 3 steps backwards. First of all, how do I know there's a jinn inside your son? How do I know that? How do you know that? Because he grunts? Everyone grunts. You should hear me sleep. It doesn't mean there's jinn inside them, because they're behaving differently, or they're behaving weird. Have you considered other options or other reasons for this? Superstition becomes a problem in society. I remember as a child, a lady coming to our house, and she had lead, and she put it in a pan, and she put it on the stove, and she turned it into liquid, and she poured it in all the angles of the house, like in the different points of the house. I remember sitting there watching her do this, and apparently that was going to take away Ayn Hasad. And my parents are very well-educated people, but this is what happened. This is where we are right now. But it was funny to say, وَاتَّبَعُوا, and they followed مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينَ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. Everything the shayateen of inns and jinn would make up upon the sovereignty of Sulaiman. Sulaiman was so powerful, myths were made. Legends were told, stories. And they were all lies. It was all just lies of superstition, and that happens when knowledge dies. Why is it that jinn seems to exist mostly in the Middle East but not in Canada? Do the jinn have like preferences of where they want to live? I felt like jinn only lived in my village when I was a kid. Because there's so many of them, I don't know how many jinn there are, but it seems like they have a very strong preference to my family members specifically. Imagining that someone can come into your brain and take hold of your life. You don't think the Prophet ﷺ would talk to us about that? You don't think the Quran come and say, hey, by the way, you can be hijacked completely. You can be fully hijacked and you won't even be you anymore. And that's the thing. He wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't tell us that can happen. He wouldn't tell us what the signs and symptoms of that is. He wouldn't tell us how exactly to remove it. We have no solid evidence for any of that. None of it. But we do have mental illnesses, and we do have psychiatrists, and we do have therapy. We do have people who are schizophrenic, and people who are challenged with bipolar and different personality disorders and anxiety and depression. We have people who are suffering in secret because their families don't understand. I spent a long time on the psychiatric wards, and I couldn't do it anymore. I had to leave. Couldn't do it anymore. It's too much. Doing both these things in here, and it's too much. Because you see a flood of Muslim youth and Muslim people who there's no point. The families don't understand. This person is ill. He's not evil. He's not bad. He's not possessed. You don't need exorcism. What's it called? Exorcism. Is that what it's called?
Exorcism.
Exorcism. Yeah. You don't need that. We don't have that in the deen. That's all made up. It's all made up. I've seen people bring an old radio with a transistor and put it upon a person and move it up and down, listening for frequencies. The jinn's right there. And then take a certain type of shoe or shahada and hit this person repeatedly, talking to his spleen, telling the jinn to move out. I've seen it. And the person was traumatized forever. This person was forever, he'll never forget this experience. He'll never forget what just happened to them. And all they needed was some therapy, and they were sexually abused as a child or something happened and no one knows, and he's never said it before. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ. Sulaiman was never involved in any of this. وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسَ السِّحْرَ. It's the shayateen who made kufr and start teaching people this stuff. And then go through the ayat and you'll see. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَمَثُوبَةٌ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ خَيْرًا. If they believed and they had proper taqwa, it would be better. None of this is needed. When we lose knowledge and we become superstitious, this is what we have. This is what we end up with. And it's very sad. Ayah number 104 is in a different color because that's how creative I am. So it's first command to the believers. In the Quran, if you're reading the Quran from the beginning as you're going down, first, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, you run by in ayah number 104. Just after this, by the way, just after he talked about superstition and all that stuff. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, la taqulu ra'ina, wa qulu anzurna wasma'u walilkafirina adhabun alim. It's like it's between parentheses. Like as he's talking to us about all the mistakes of Bani Israel, take a moment and gives us a command. Oh, those who believe, never say ra'ina, never say make it easy for us. If you go and buy something in Syria, right? Yeah, especially in Syria, specifically in our, I don't know if the same word is used in other countries. But if you go and you're buying something from someone and he tells you this is how much it's worth. This is worth 1,000 lira. The first thing the person will say is ra'ina. Can you bring it down a bit? It's too hard, it's too much. Bring it down a bit, please. And of course, this is the tradition. He will the seller will never tell you the proper price. He will always overshoot by 550% or something, and then he'll sell it to you for 50 lira, even though he asked for 1,000. He has no problem. He bought it for 5. He doesn't care. That's how it works. You say ra'ina, and he says, well, this is the best price, and then you say it again, and go back and forth. And if you don't have this time, you don't have the effort, the energy, like I do, you get ripped off every day of your life. I've never bought a piece of clothing in my life in Syria because I don't know how to do this. But that's how it's done. It's an art. Women, mashallah, are amazing. Amazing. And may Allah preserve my mother and wife. They bought every piece of clothing from me because it's impossible. It's very difficult. So, well, not when you're buying and not when you're doing business, obviously, but when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands you, don't say ra'ina. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you this is what you're going to do, this is how it's going to be, don't say ra'ina. It doesn't make it easier for us. Bring it down a bit. Say, give us a minute, give us time for us to learn. Give us time to accept, to understand, to comprehend, to practice, to become better. Wasma'u, then do what you're told. But don't say ra'ina. Don't start bargaining with God. Don't say bargaining and bringing down what He's telling you to do. Don't bargain it, don't bring it down. But Israel, their problem was they always thought they could do that. They always thought they could bring down the amount of commands, or they can change the command or the nature of the command. They thought they could maybe do 60% of it or 70% of it. Don't say that and don't think that and don't hope for that. Just take it as it is. If it's hard, work with it. You can say, Ya Rabbi, I'm finding this hard. I know it's right, I'm finding it hard. I'm trying to get it all done. I'm only getting 70%, Ya Rabbi. I know I'm not doing the full part. That is better than saying, no, it's only 70% and I'm doing the full 70%, so I'm doing 100%, so I'm better. No, that's not how it is. You're better off saying, I am a sinful Muslim. I'm making these mistakes. I know this is right. I'm not doing it. I know it's right. I'm trying my best. That is, I respect that. No one can fault you or shame you for that. Shame on those who shame you for that. Shame on someone who shames you for saying, I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded me to do this and said that's haram and I'm finding it hard. I'm trying. I don't respect someone who's coming and saying, no, that's not halal. You're one of those sheikhs, right? Who are, you're from that part of the world. You're that type of sheikh. You're from the, you're from the first century or whatever. You come from back then. Just because you don't want to acknowledge what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in His book, just because you don't like what He says, you're going to pin it on us. We refuse to grow with civilization, grow with time. That's not what it's about. For you to say something that's halal haram or haram halal because you don't like it, that's a musibah. For you to say, I know that's what he said, but I can't do it, that's a different thing. They're not the same. Someone who doesn't pray, there's two types of people who do that. Someone who says, I don't believe that prayer is something that you have to do at a certain time, in a certain way. I believe prayer is something that goes from your heart to God, and it's between you and Him. No, that's fine. If that's what you want to believe, that's fine, but that's not Islam. I'm sorry, you just started a new cult. Congratulations, go, register it somewhere. It's a new cult that has a whole different way of things, that's how it's done. But if you come and tell me, I know this is how it's done, but I'm struggling with it. I can't hold on to every prayer, I'm finding it hard. That's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing. That no one can shame you. You deserve to be supported and helped and stood by, and that's what you get. You don't get shamed for that. But when you come and start making the other thing, don't start bargaining and bringing things out, changing it. And those who do the opposite will be punished. Okay, that's the first command. So, ayah number 105, again we have one more mistake or one more paragraph talking about Bani Israel. We'll hopefully finish Bani Israel. It's the longest part of the surah, it's the most complicated one. When ayah number 105 to 119 is a bit long. It goes around 2 pages and a bit. Talks about their arrogance and their need to be superior. Again, reminding you that it's not to criticize Bani Israel, it's something that we have. And I'll give you some examples. Ayah number 109. وَدَّ كَثِيرٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ لَوْ يَرُدُّونَكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ إِيمَانِكُمْ كُفَّارًا حَسَدًا. I'm sorry, you remind me to move this one. كُفَّارًا حَسَدًا مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِهِمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الْحَقُّ. The people of the book wanted you all as Muslims to leave Islam and go back to being pagans again, because they were envious of them. Because they didn't want you to be as good as they were, or be better. They had an issue of arrogance and superiority upon you. And when you came with something that was just as beautiful as what they had, you came with a similar version of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands, and now you were becoming better people, you were thinking better, they wanted you to leave it. Because they couldn't handle that you were improving and becoming better people, and out of envy they wanted you to leave the haqq so they could continuously be better, instead of joining. Look at ayah number 111. وَقَالُوا لَنْ يَدْخُلَ الْجَنَّةَ. This is a very scary one for us. وَقَالُوا لَنْ يَدْخُلَ الْجَنَّةَ إِلَّا مَنْ كَانَ هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارًا تِلْكَ أَمَانِيُّهُم. They're saying no one will enter Jannah except those who follow Musa or Isa. That's what they hope for. That's their wishful thinking. That's their wishful thinking. قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Give evidence for that. That you're the only ones, that you have somehow you have ownership of Jannah, show it. Look at the ayah after that, in the beginning of the page. We'll come back to this in one. وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ لَيْسَتِ النَّصَارَى عَلَى شَيْءٍ وَقَالَتِ النَّصَارَى لَيْسَتِ الْيَهُودُ عَلَى شَيْءٍ وَهُمْ يَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ. And each group is saying the other group is fully wrong, and everything they have is improper, and they're going nowhere. And everyone's reading the book, and the book is saying the opposite. The book is saying that the Yahud had the word of Allah, and the Christians had the word of Allah, and the Muslims had the word of Allah, and other groups had the word of Allah as well. كَذَلِكَ قَالَ الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ مِثْلَ قَوْلِهِمْ. Ignorant people always say something similar to that. فَاللَّهُ يَحْكُمُ بَيْنَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فِي مَا كَانُوا فِيهِ يَخْتَلِفُونَ. Allah will judge upon them on the day of judgment. This issue of ownership upon Jannah, and that others have no haqq on anything that they say, and we're the only right group, and everyone else is wrong, only in Jannah. Right now you're thinking to your mind, but yeah, that's how it is for us. You're probably thinking, yeah, but isn't that, well, is it? I don't know. You tell me. Read the Quran is saying. Is this what the Quran is saying? Is that the mistake that Banu Israel made? Are we supposed to make the same mistake? Are we supposed to say the same thing? Actually, in detail, this will be talked about in Surat Al-Nisa. The Surah talks about values, because this is more of an issue of values, really, than anything else. As a value, we'll talk about in Surah لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا أَمَانِيِّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ مَنْ يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا يُجْزَ بِهِ. We'll talk about it at that point. But that's what they did. And where does that come from? Where does that speech come from? That we go to Jannah, we own Jannah, we're the right, everyone's wrong. It comes from arrogance. It comes in, we're better. We're from a better race, and we're superior, and Allah loves us more. And Allah loves us more. ومن أظلم ممن منع مساجد الله أن يذكر فيها اسمه وسعى في خرابها. Their arrogance and superiority complex is leading them to destroy masajid and to destroy places where other people are worshipping Allah by saying, well, this is not proper worship. In Islam, is it okay to bring down a synagogue or a church or any place where people are being worshipped, where Allah is being worshipped? No. You're not allowed to touch a place of worship, no matter what you want or what you're doing, what's happening. You're never allowed to do that. Even though you may say, well, our way is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prefers, correct, but you're not allowed to touch a place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being worshipped. And even if you don't approve of the way they're worshipping, even if you don't think it's the right way, وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ, and who is worse and who has more dhulm in them than someone who does that. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ فَأَيْنَمَا تُوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns the east and the west, and wherever you turn your face, you'll find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. He is subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-wasi' is the one who can encompass everything. And He is the most knowledgeable. People will worship Allah differently. Well, you say, well, now you're not contradicting yourself. One moment you tell us Islam has certain ways you have to do it, and then another moment you say, well, other people do it differently. Yes, other people do it differently. It's not my job to judge them. It's not my job to force them to do anything else. It's my job to follow the deen the way He told me, and to explain to you the way He explained it, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to ask of you, if you are Muslim, to follow it the way He wants. But then what you do is not something that I have a say in. I don't have the ability to come and force you. And if you do it differently than me, and if you do it wrong, if in my assessment it's wrong, it doesn't make me better. It doesn't give me superiority or the ability to be arrogant. Are you understanding that? It's a very, very important balance that Banu Israel didn't get right. And we still haven't got right. But we can, if we just start understanding how to deal with it all. The final, and this goes to ayah number 119 basically. From 120 to 123, he says, وَلَن تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ. From these four verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, yes, we gave Banu Israel a way to live. We gave Musa's people and Isa's people, Christians and Jews, they were given different ways to live. However, what we gave you, Ya Muhammad, is a better way. Hold on to it. The way is better. You guys aren't. Arrogance is saying that one individual is better than another individual. That is not Islamic. That's what the ayat, that's what 105 to 119 talked about. That's not okay. But to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me a better way, that's fine. Having a better way doesn't mean I'm a better person. Having the Quran doesn't mean that the people sitting here are better than others who don't have the Quran. Not at all. It just means that you have the potential to be closer to God if you do it right. But as far as you know, they could be more closer to God than you. They could be more beloved to God than you. Have no idea. You have no idea. It's a very important distinction between saying I am better and saying this is better. That's not the same thing. It isn't. Sometimes we think it is, but it is not. They're not the same thing. Being better than someone else is a judgment only Allah can make, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He'll make it Yawm al-Qiyamah for whoever He wants. But when He tells you this is the superior book, that's a different story altogether. وَلَن تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ قُلْ إِنَّ هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى. And the Jews and Christians will not ever be happy with you. They'll never accept you fully until you leave what you have and you follow them fully. Tell them no. The guidance of Allah is the guidance that I have in my hands. وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ بعد الذي جاءك من الحق من العلم ما لك من الله من ولي ولا نصير. If you go follow something else, if you leave this and you go follow something else after what you were given, then you're on your own. And you've made the worst mistake that you can possibly make. This finishes, this chapter finishes, or this first part, because the second, we're going to the second part. This part finishes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, Ya Bani Israel, exactly what He said at the beginning. If you go back, the beginning of this part, of when Allah starts to talk to Bani Israel, you go back to ayah number 40, just after He's finished talking about Adam, when He started speaking about the mistakes of Bani Israel, it began, Ya Bani Israel, right? اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأوفوا بعهدي, and the commands began. It began with Ya Bani Israel, remember the blessing I gave you. And this chapter will end with the exact same thing. And this part will end with the same thing. Ya Bani Israel, اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأني فضلتكم على العالمين. Remember the blessing that I gave, the blessings that I gave you. Again, this is not for us to say, to go tell Bani Israel. By the way, Bani Israel, Allah says, no, this is saying the same to us. He also gave us a blessing, a book with guidance in it. وَأَنِّي فَضَّلْتُكُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ, I favored you upon everyone else. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا لَا تَجْزِي نَفْسٌ عَنْ نَفْسٍ شَيْئًا وَلَا يُقْبَلُ مِنْهَا عَدْلٌ وَلَا تَنْفَعُهَا شَفَاعَةٌ وَلَا هُمْ يُنصَرُونَ. And prepare yourselves for the day where no one can benefit anyone else. You guys can't benefit each other. And all that will be accepted from the nafs is what is offered and what it did. It will be treated with full justice on that day. And no one will be pulled out of what they have done. And no one will be excused for what they have done. And that is the part of the first part is not done. Because we go back, if you take a look. So ayah number 30 was the description, then the story of the first Khalifa Adam, and examples of those who failed the mission, Bani Israel. There's more lessons in Bani Israel's part than anywhere else. I just gave you the points. After that we move on to examples of those who succeeded. I don't think we have time, is it? What was it now? 3 minutes? Okay, we come to that. So next time on Sunday, we'll talk about the examples of those who succeeded. It's a bit more uplifting. Next week, way more uplifting. This was all very stressful. This is all talking about people who made mistakes that some sound very similar to the ones we're making. They sound like exactly what we're doing. We feel ashamed. We're doing exactly what they did. We can't seem to move away from anything that they've done before us, and we haven't learned it all. However, the ayat are full of lessons. Don't fall in the same mistakes. Don't fall in the same mistakes. But the second one after this, example of those succeeded. So we get to talk about Ibrahim alayhi salam. We get to talk about Yaqub alayhi salam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last page of the juz', in the first part, gives us advice. Read it before next week, because it's beautiful. From ayah 135 to 141, just one page of advice. And you will hear things, and you'll hear it differently this time. Because why? Because now you understand how the surah works. There's an introduction, the first part, you're a Khalifa, here's the mission, here's the first Khalifa, here are all the people who made mistakes, and then you'll read it, and you have some feeling towards it. Now, okay, yeah, because I know what they did before us. I know the mistakes that they made, I know how they didn't do this properly, and then you hear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to you and giving you advice, and it'll mean something different than other verses. So we'll continue inshallah from the examples of those who succeeded in Ibrahim and Yaqub next week inshallah. Subhanakallah bihamdik, shadu la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi, jazakumullahu khairan, barakallah.